Tonight, the fog of war. Mass casualties after tank fire hits a United Nations shelter in Gaza.
As Israeli forces conduct major operations in the fight against Hamas.
Here in the United States, a border battle on Capitol Hill.
So many aspects of this bill, as we understand it, that make no sense whatsoever.
As lawmakers work to secure military aid for Ukraine and Israel.
And the Arctic exposed.
The U.S. is very poorly positioned in order to defend its own sovereignty in the region.
New concerns over securing the Arctic. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A possible breakthrough in the Gaza war. Good evening, I'm Jenna Browder.
Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, a new effort is underway to secure a major deal for the release of all Hamas hostages taken at the outset of the war in Gaza.
Now, the president reportedly will deploy the CIA director to negotiate a deal to free the more than 100 hostages in exchange for a 2-month ceasefire. The Washington Post reporting William Burns will travel to Europe for meetings involving Qatar, Israel, and Egypt. Meanwhile, Israel is denying responsibility for mass casualties after tanks fired multiple rounds into a United Nations shelter for Palestinian refugees. The Israeli military says the IDF is conducting an in-depth review of that incident that left smoke billowing from UN structures in Gaza's Han Yunis. The latest comes as the UN International Court of Justice in The Hague rules tomorrow on South Africa's claim that Israel is committing Jewish genocide.
The allegations that started this process, that Israel is committing genocide, we believe those to be unfounded. Simultaneously, though, we'll continue to raise with our Israeli partners the moral and strategic imperative that they need to take additional steps to minimize deaths on civilians.
All this as the families of hostages held by Hamas grow increasingly more desperate and as the humanitarian crisis for Palestinians in Gaza worsens by the day.
Well, here at home, 49 out of the 51 Democratic senators signed on to a measure calling for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That action coming despite Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly rejecting the idea. Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz is set to introduce the amendment to an aid package for Israel, but he says he won't hold up the bill if his measure fails to get a floor vote. Senators Joe Manchin and John Fetterman are the only two Democrats who did not support the amendment.
At the same time, securing aid to send to Ukraine is right now a top priority on Capitol Hill. But a major sticking point has prevented any real movement.
Immigration at America's southern border is creating what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell calls a quandary, complicated even more by the 2024 election. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has been following the battle over the border. Abigail, we know it's been a sticking point to passing foreign aid. The question is, are we any closer to a border deal?
Well, John, at the moment, it does not seem that way, and there seems to be a lot of confusion amongst Republican senators about what might happen next. Now, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has been openly supporting some kind of border deal that is coupled with a Ukrainian aid package. But at the moment, it does not seem like he has support within his own party to get that bill across the finish line. And reportedly, former President Donald Trump is one of the reasons why, and he's apparently making it quite difficult for McConnell to get this support amongst Republican senators, allegedly encouraging Republican senators not to pass a border deal until he is president again, a move Senator Mitt Romney calls a shocking development.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump, and the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
Senator James Lankford, who is the lead Republican negotiator in the border talks, told a reporter today that he does not believe that President Trump is trying to undercut the border deal. But Lankford added that border security is a national security issue, and it is something that Congress needs to solve now and not just wait until there is a Republican in the White House.
Abigail, we always know there are no such things as guarantees. So if the border deal dissolves, where does that leave funding for Ukraine?
Well, McConnell told reporters today that they are still trying to get something across the finish line on the border deal. But the likely next step is that if it appears that is just not going to happen, that they will try and pass a standalone Ukraine aid package, which has far more support, would likely pass the Senate without a problem, and is a far less toxic issue right now than border security. John, Jenna.
All right, White House correspondent Abigail Robertson. Thank you, Abby. Well, Matt Sorens is the Vice President of Advocacy and Policy at World Relief, and he joins us now. Matt, welcome. So your group is in El Paso, Texas this week, giving tours to evangelicals. Tell us about that and why.
Yeah, on a regular basis, we bring evangelical leaders to different points along the border, really to, come and see what's actually happening. Because we hear a lot, in media and, from different perspectives, but we want people to see for themselves, to hear from Border Patrol, to hear from churches that are caring for vulnerable migrants on both sides of the border in the U.S. and in Mexico. And we do this through some partners here in El Paso. We do it at World Relief's office in San Diego and Tijuana as well. I was in McAllen, Texas yesterday. So different points along the border. We just want people to be able to have an on-the-ground perspective of what's happening and to realize that this isn't a simple issue. There are complicated dynamics here. We want to affirm the dignity of every person made in the image of God, protect human life, especially those fleeing persecution. And we also want secure borders. And we want our government to have an orderly process to be able to distinguish between those seeking to do harm and those seeking to actually escape from persecution.
So, Matt, we know you're helping guide the tours, showing different groups what the local churches there are doing. What kinds of things are you seeing, and what's been the reaction of some who've been on those tours?
Yeah, I think most people come back from these trips with more questions than they have answers, which is understandable because it really does underscore that this is such a complex situation. I think sometimes we want to turn it into very simple. But one of the dynamics that I think a lot of people leave with is this recognition that the large majority of people who are showing up at the U.S.-Mexico border are, they're not trying to sneak into the country. They're trying to find the Border Patrol to seek asylum under the terms of U.S. law. That is to say, they are saying that they have a well-founded fear of persecution, and they want the U.S. government to vet their story. Now, that doesn't mean that they all are telling the truth or they're all going to qualify for asylum. And the reality is our government is so overwhelmed with the number of people showing up. It is way exceeds the current capacity to actually process cases in a timely fashion. And that's why at World Relief, we've been encouraged by bipartisan conversations about how do we improve border security and, find more order and put more resources at the border for Border Patrol and for the ports of entry that need to process asylum claims. I'm discouraged by some of the news we're hearing even in the last 24 hours that it does seem like those negotiations might be falling apart. But we hope that senators, Republicans and Democrats and independents will stay at the table. Not that we can affirm we haven't seen the details of a bill to be able to say we support this or not, because we do want to make sure that whatever they come up with also respects due process for asylum seekers. But I think the people who are, we've brought to the border are convinced that we need policies that both respect human dignity and ensure secure borders.
Yeah. Talk to us about the spiritual needs that you're seeing down there as you work with churches and the immigrants who are coming across the border. How can the church help and Christians be a part of the solution, Matt?
Yeah, I love that question. These are individuals, every one of whom has gone through a really difficult journey to get to this point, often having fled a situation in their country of origin, whether that was Venezuela or Haiti or Guatemala or wherever they've come from. Sometimes it's individuals who are actually persecuted for their Christian faith. We've encountered people in that circumstance, or people who are fleeing gang violence or just fleeing extreme poverty. And some of them already know Jesus, and that's always been encouraging to me, the way that we've seen people who are, waiting in a church-based shelter in Juarez or in Tijuana, waiting for the opportunity to pursue an asylum claim and relying on Jesus in incredible ways. I mean, sometimes I've offered to pray for people and they turn around and want to pray for me as well. But we've also heard from the church leaders that, there's others who have never actually been inside of a church before it is the people who are sheltering them. And they are encountering Jesus for the first time through his people. And there's an incredible opportunity for the church to witness there to who Jesus is as well.
Opportunity indeed. All right, Matt Sorens of World Relief, thank you so much. And thanks for what you're doing down there.
Thanks, Matt. Well, while the debate over the southern border wages on, some lawmakers are pressing to secure a region that's often overlooked, the Arctic.
That's right. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has a look at why some of America's most remote territory remains vital to homeland security.
With the Alaska Purchase in 1867, the U.S. became one of 8 countries with territory above the Arctic Circle. Russia has the largest presence, and as its alliance with China strengthens, so does Beijing's influence.
We are in a new era of authoritarian aggression led by the dictators Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. They are running hostile regimes that seek to control access to the Arctic region.
In the summer of 2022, China and Russia deployed their first joint naval task force of 7 ships into Alaska's waters. It happened again last summer with 11 ships.
This is a sign of things to come. We not only need more Coast Guard assets, but also a Navy presence back in Alaska. We will need to be able to respond more rapidly in the future to these kind of incursions.
With sea ice receding, experts warn Arctic routes are more accessible than ever, and U.S. adversaries have built up Arctic capabilities in military facilities, leaving America in their wake.
The U.S. is very poorly positioned in order to defend its own sovereignty in the region versus the Russians, which have invested heavily over the past couple decades in basically trying to militarize the region.
The U.S. currently has only one operational polar icebreaker ship, which is uniquely designed to navigate the Arctic waters. Russia's fleet has more than 50, and the Chinese are on pace to surpass the U.S. by 2025. Under pressure to keep up, the Coast Guard wants 8 to 9 more icebreakers in the region.
We need your continued support to build out our polar security cutters and rapidly accelerate us into the future where we can have a greater capacity for icebreakers.
Lawmakers consider securing the Arctic an urgent critical need, and this year have authorized roughly $168 million for military construction and equipment. With the nation's first deep water port underway in Nome, Alaska, the goal is for there to be the infrastructure to handle these icebreakers and Navy destroyers by the end of the decade. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Well, First Lady Jill Biden is championing a new gun safety initiative. In an announcement today, she laid out the plan, which enlists school leaders to help promote safe storage of firearms. Gun violence remains the leading cause of death for American children, and most guns used in school shootings are taken from the shooter's home. The administration's initiative involves 3 new executive actions. The Justice Department will release a guide to safe firearm storage. The Education Department will send a letter about safe firearm storage to school principals nationwide, and materials will also be distributed to schools that can be shared with families. Currently, there is not a law requiring gun owners to lock up their firearms.
Coming up, the latest that suggests the economy is humming right along. Next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. A stronger than expected growth report today, boosting hopes that America will avoid a recession. The U.S. economy growing at a respectable rate of 3.4% from October through December. The fourth quarter showing a deceleration from the red-hot, nearly 5% growth rate of the previous quarter. America's gross domestic product has grown at an annual rate of 2% or more for 6 straight quarters. With the economy sure to be on top of on the minds of voters ahead of the November elections, the president touted the new report in Wisconsin today, even while acknowledging the inflation rate remains too high.
Thanks to the American people, America now has the strongest growth, the lowest inflation rate of any major economy in the world. It's because of you. We obviously have more work to do.
And with us now is Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst and Washington Bureau Chief at Bankrate. Mark, good to see you. So this report suggesting the economy averted a recession in the final quarter of last year. Does that help to quell some of the fears that we may be in for a recession in the near future, or should we still be a bit wary?
What we can say is, as you did very well there, Jenna, that the economy did outperform expectations, really going back over the last couple of years. As we've talked about many times, our surveys of economists had indicated that the risks of recession over the past 2 years were seen as extremely elevated, and yet the U.S. economy really did manage to dodge that. And it's a testament really to the power of the job market and consumers, who also helped to deliver a better than expected holiday shopping season. There will always be recessions. They are inevitable parts of the economic cycle, along with expansions, but there is not one apparently on the near-term horizon.
Mark, you just mentioned a key word, consumers. So what will it take for Americans' perception of the economy to begin to jibe with what this new report is showing about the strength of the economy?
Those perceptions probably, John, always work with a lag, meaning that our acceptance or understanding what's happening in the economy takes a while to sort of sink in. And so one of the things that has helped to elevate consumer sentiment lately has been the slowing or lower inflation rate. But the rate of inflation is to be in contrast with elevated prices, which have been persistent. And one thing that is helping us broadly overall with all these considerations is the fact that gasoline prices are down from a year ago and at the lowest level in about 2 years. But as we all know, food remains elevated, the cost of housing remains elevated, the cost of new vehicles and insurance remain elevated. Those aren't going away, but wage growth that is outpacing inflation is helping.
Mark, weekly jobless claims are up, with thousands of layoffs this year in the tech sector alone. Does that dispel some of the good news in this latest quarterly report?
Certainly undermines it, Jenna, and I think that we've been talking about the likelihood that the job market does continue to soften, let's say, over the next 12 months. The unemployment rate recently at 3.7%, and absolutely, we have been seeing a louder drumbeat of job cut announcements, and we would expect that to sort of seep in into the employment data. Not necessarily in the very near term. We have a jobs report about a week away, but I think we will see that in the near future.
The Fed, as you know, Mark, meets next week. Do you see any potential that the central bank could maybe cut interest rates?
Not next week, John, but I do think we'll be setting the table for that. Whether it's March, whether it's beyond, we'll have to see. But the falling inflation rate means that the current level of the Fed's benchmark rate becomes increasingly tight, and so officials will want to bring that down so that they don't over-restrict the U.S. economy.
All right, Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. We always appreciate your time and insights. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Well, targeting kids for talking about Christianity, why one group is going after so-called good news clubs. That story and more just 2 minutes away. Welcome back. Religious affiliation is fading away in America. A new report from the Pew Research Center finds 28% of U.S. adults now describe themselves as religious nuns, people with no particular religious affiliation. That's up about 8% from just a decade ago. But while more Americans are divorcing religion, a majority still say there's something out there bigger than themselves. 56% believe in a higher power outside of Christianity.
Well, an after-school program is raising red flags for some parents across the country. It's called the Satanic Temple, which is about to launch multiple student clubs this year.
Now, while not new, as Brody Carter reports, some are questioning the Temple's strategy of targeting schools that have Christian after-school programs called good news clubs.
Satan has no room in this district.
In Memphis, Tennessee, outrage after the Satanic Temple announced plans for an after-school club for grades K through 5 at a local school.
You know, we're not sacrificing babies or killing baby goats. I remind the media that a good part of our population is vegetarian or vegan, and they literally wouldn't hurt a fly.
Satan Club leader June Everett says kids will learn about nature and science, using cartoons like this to fashion Satan as a force for good.
Satan's not a scary guy. Wants you to share it to be kind.
The Satan Club strategy, counter-programming at schools where a good news club already exists.
We only go to the school districts where there is a good news club or other religious club operating.
The Satanic Temple did not respond to CBN's interview request. However, last year, Everett told CBN News that she got involved after a good news club sponsor scared her first-grade child.
He went on to tell me how he was going to burn in hell, be taken away from everyone that he knew and loved, his mom, his dad, Molly, our dog at the time, if we didn't start going to church and accept Jesus Christ into our hearts.
The Satanic Temple has 10 after-school clubs in 6 states, which is a flash in the pan compared to the Child Evangelism Fellowship's 3,000 good news clubs in the U.S., plus 80,000 worldwide. The mission, share the gospel with students after school.
So even though parts of the message can be a little bit offensive, we have to be true to the message of Christ and explain, because he died on the cross for my sins, for our sins.
In fact, both clubs are protected under the same 2001 Supreme Court ruling, which kept the Good News Club from being denied access from using a public school's facilities after hours.
We have taken to court maybe 24 situations in which we have gone to court for the right to be in the public school, and we won 100% of those cases.
And now a Kansas school district has approved the Satanic Temple's first high school Satan Club. As these clubs gain national headlines, Moses Esteves with the Good News Club recommends letting these Satan clubs in, leaving the decision-making in the hands of parents.
The school district has several options. They can kick out all the clubs, and that's certainly one of the options, but usually there's a big complaint from the community, because the community pays for the schools with their tax monies, and they want the clubs to be there for their children.
In Kansas, students have gathered more than 8,000 signatures to oppose the Satan Club. However, the club has met all requirements for registration. It's set to start in the coming weeks. Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. Coming up, an icy rescue that's a testament to teamwork. That's next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, divine intervention and quick thinking saved the life of a 12-year-old Michigan boy.
A pizza delivery driver, Jonathan Garza, was picking up a pizza on Tuesday when he heard someone screaming. Garza soon realized a boy had fallen into an icy pond and called 911. Within minutes, an officer was on the scene, crawling across the ice with a flotation device. The officer, who fell into the water himself, was able to slide the emergency ring to the boy, and a group of bystanders and first responders pulled both to safety. Police thanked everyone involved, especially Garza, for being in the right place at the right time.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Fortunately, he was at the right place at the right time and had the wherewithal of sending the life raft over to the young boy. And fortunately, others were there to help as well.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation this evening.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.